Look, out in the hollers of West Virginia, there's a quiet understanding. When you hear digging where there shouldn't be digging, you don't investigate. And if you hear a song that sounds like it's coming from under the earth, you do not, under any circumstances, try to find the singer. Because in these mountains, some things have been buried for a reason, and if you disturb them, they'll find a way to drag you down with them. My name is Silas. I spent 26 years in the Logan County coal fields. I've seen cave-ins that swallow entire crews, but nothing prepared me for what happened in Shaft 7B 5,000 feet below the surface. It was April 2017. I was operating a Joy 14 Seminaire continuous miner 20-ton beast that chews through rock with tungsten carbide teeth. My spotter, a young guy named Caleb, was about 50 feet behind me, checking the roof bolts. Suddenly, the machine's cutting head didn't just stop, it screamed. A high-pitched metal-on-metal shriek that bypassed my ear protection. I killed the power. The silence that followed was suffocating. I climbed out, my helmet lamp cutting through the coal dust. Where there should have been a wall of black shale, there was a slab of smooth gray stone. It looked like polished marble, but it was warm. Carved into it was a jagged spiral that seemed to pulse when my light hit it. Caleb walked up, his face pale. "Silas, that ain't coal. That looks like a door." He was right. And as we stood there, a sound started coming from behind the stone. A rhythmic scratching. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Like someone with very long nails was trying to find a seam. Then, without a sound, the slab didn't break, it receded. It slid back into the mountain, revealing a dark, square tunnel that wasn't supported by any timber or steel. The air coming out smelled like ozone and old, dried flowers. And then, the song started. A low humming melody that felt like it was vibrating inside my own skull. Caleb didn't even look at me. He just started walking into the dark. "Caleb, wait. Get back here, kid." I lunged for his shoulder, but he was surprisingly fast. He didn't even have his flashlight on. He was walking into that black throat of a tunnel, as if he were being pulled by a magnet. I grabbed my radio, a standard Motorola intrinsically safe handheld. "Jimmy, we've got a breach in the face. Caleb's gone inside an unregistered cavity. Send the rescue team to 7B now." All I got back was a sound that made my skin crawl. It wasn't static. It was the sound of a woman laughing, but the pitch was wrong. It sounded like the laugh was being played at half speed, deep and distorted. I couldn't leave the kid. I checked my belt. I had my self-rescuer oxygen pack, good for 60 minutes, my rock hammer, and my heavy-duty mag light. I stepped over the threshold of that gray stone door. The moment I crossed the line, the temperature didn't drop, it skyrocketed. The humidity hit me like a wet blanket, smelling of copper and overripe peaches. My mag light beam, which usually cuts through a mile of darkness, felt dim, as if the shadows here were thicker than normal. "Caleb." I hissed. I saw him about 30 feet ahead. He was standing perfectly still, facing a wall. But the wall wasn't stone anymore. It looked like it was made of thousands of small, tightly packed bones, ribs, vertebrae, phalanges, all bleached white and fused together. Caleb turned around. His helmet lamp was off, but his eyes, they were reflecting my light in a way human eyes shouldn't. They had a silver metallic sheen, like a cat's eyes in the middle of a highway. "Silas," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of his usual Kentucky drawl. "It's not a cave. It's a throat, and we just walked past the teeth." Before I could grab him, the floor beneath us shifted. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a muscular contraction. The entire tunnel, the walls of bone, the floor of warm stone tightened. I looked back at the entrance. The gray stone slab was sliding shut. "Run." I tackled Caleb, shoving him toward the closing gap. We scrambled over the floor, but the ground was becoming slick with a translucent, oily fluid. I looked down and saw my own reflection in the liquid, but my reflection's mouth was open wider than any human jaw should go. We reached the door just as it slammed shut with a heavy final thud. We were back in the coal shaft. The Joy miner was sitting there, cold and dead. Caleb was shaking on the floor, his eyes back to normal, sobbing about a green sun he saw in the dark. I reached for my radio to tell Jimmy we were out, but I stopped. I looked at the gray stone wall. The spiral carving was gone. In its place, etched into the stone in fresh, jagged scratches, were 3 words, "Whistle for me." I felt the cold breeze on the back of my neck. We were 5,000 feet down. There is no breeze in a dead-end shaft. I turned my head slowly, and there, sitting on top of my 120-ton mining machine, was a small, tattered doll. It was made of coal dust-stained burlap, and it was missing its eyes. I know what you're thinking. It's just a prank. It was the one we buried with my sister back in 1984 after the Big Creek flood. I didn't tell Caleb. I didn't tell the company. But before I tell you what happened when the whistle actually started coming from the ventilation ducts, I need to remind you. Some things are buried because they don't belong in the light. If you want to know the true cost of digging too deep, hit that subscribe button. Because what followed wasn't a haunting. It was a hunt. I picked up the doll, it was warm, and then my radio, which was still switched off, emitted a single perfect note. I didn't just pick up that doll, I felt my soul leave my body for a second. The burlap was coarse, stained with the exact same red clay from the 1984 flood. It shouldn't have been there. It couldn't have been there. Caleb, get up, now. I grabbed him by the collar of his high-vis vest and hauled him toward the man trip, the small rail car we used to get in and out of the deep shafts. He didn't move. He was staring at the ventilation duct overhead. Silas, do you hear that? I froze. The silence of the mine is never truly silent. There's the dripping of groundwater, the creak of the roof bolts, the hum of the distant fans. But this was different. It was a rhythmic, wet thumping coming from inside the galvanized steel ducting. Thump, thump, thump. It started as a low, mournful New Year's Eve party horn sound, then transitioned into a perfect melodic mimicry of the reversed lullaby from behind the stone door. The radio, Caleb whispered. The power knob was turned to the off position, but the small LED screen was glowing a bright, sickly amber, no channel numbers, just one word scrolling across the screen, mine. We scrambled into the man trip. I slammed the lever forward, and the electric motor whined as we began the 3-mile journey back to the main hoist. The darkness in the tunnel felt like it was thickening, pressing against the sides of the car. My headlamp started to flicker. This isn't like a movie. When a miner's lamp flickers 5,000 feet down, it means the methane sensors are acting up or the battery is being drained by a localized electromagnetic surge. As we sped through Shaft 7A, the whistling followed us. It wasn't behind us, it was moving through the rock walls. We could hear it echoing from the crosscuts, the side tunnels that had been sealed off decades ago. Then, the man trip's headlights hit something standing in the middle of the tracks about 100 yards ahead. I slammed the brakes. The steel wheels screeched against the rails, throwing sparks into the dark. We skidded to a halt. Standing in the center of the rail line was a man. He was wearing a vintage 1950s canvas mining suit and a rusted pigeon breast brass lamp on his head. He was facing away from us. Hey! We're clearing the sector. Get in the car, I yelled, my hand gripping the heavy iron wrench I'd grabbed from the man trip floor. The man didn't turn around, but his head, it started to rotate, not like a human neck. It spun a full 18 degrees until he was looking directly at us over his own spine. He didn't have a face. It was just a smooth surface of that same polished gray stone from the door. No eyes, no nose, just a single jagged spiral carved where the mouth should be. And from that spiral, the whistle came out loud enough to shatter the glass on our man trip's dashboard. What? I didn't think. I slammed the car into reverse. Caleb, keep your eyes on him. Don't look away. Silas, there's more of them, Caleb choked out. I looked back. Standing in the tunnel behind us were dozens of them. Some were dressed in the clothes of miners from the 1920s. Some in modern gear, some in clothes I didn't recognize, buckskins and pelts. All of them had stone faces. All of them were standing perfectly still. They weren't attacking. It wasn't static anymore. It was the sound of my sister's voice, the voice of a 6-year-old girl who had been gone for over 30 years. Silas, you forgot to whistle back. It's not polite to leave the song unfinished. Suddenly, the roof of the shaft groaned. A mountain bump, a localized burst of pressure hit. Huge slabs of coal began to explode off the ribs of the tunnel. The hoist. We have to make it to the hoist. I screamed over the roar of the collapsing rock. Before I tell you what we found when the elevator doors finally opened at the surface, and why the Logan County Sheriff's Office found me 3 miles away in a dry creek bed with my sister's doll but no memory of how I got there, you need to understand something. The coal we burn for electricity. It's not just dead plants. In Appalachia, coal is a sponge. It soaks up the screams, the songs, and the people who go too deep. If you want to know why Shaft 7B was filled with 300 tons of liquid concrete the very next day, you need to stay tuned for the conclusion. But first, check your own reflection. Does your mouth look a little wider than it did this morning? The man trip surged forward, plowing through the first stone-faced figure. It didn't feel like hitting a person. It felt like hitting a pillar of solid salt. The entity shattered into 1,000 gray crystals, and for a second the tunnel was filled with the smell of overripe peaches. We reached the hoist. The heavy steel cage was waiting. We dove inside, and I hammered the surface button. As the elevator began its long, rattling climb, I looked down through the floor grates. The bottom of the shaft was filled with them. Hundreds of stone-faced miners, all looking up, their spiral mouths open, whistling a harmony that sounded like the end of the world. And at the very center, holding a lantern that burned with a cold, green flame, was Caleb. But the Caleb I had just pushed into the elevator with me was standing right next to me. I looked at the Caleb in the elevator. He wasn't shaking anymore. He was smiling. A wide, mocking grin that didn't use any muscles. "Thanks for the ride, Silas," he whispered. The ride up that shaft felt like it took a lifetime. Every time the elevator cage rattled against the guide rails, I expected the cable to snap, or worse, for the thing wearing Caleb's skin to reach out and touch me. The Caleb standing next to me didn't breathe. He just stared at the closed steel doors of the hoist, that wide, impossible grin fixed on his face. The air inside the cage started to smell like that sweet, rotting peach scent again, so thick I could feel it coating the back of my throat. "You're not him," I whispered, my hand white-knuckled around my rock hammer. The thing didn't turn its head. Its voice came out of its chest, muffled and vibrating. "I'm what's left of him, Silas. The mountain doesn't like to give back the whole person. It keeps the heavy parts, the parts that scream." The elevator hit the surface level with a violent jolt. The doors hissed open, and the cold night air of Logan County rushed in. I didn't wait. I lunged out of that cage, sprinting past the empty foreman's office and the silent wash house. I expected to see the night shift crew, the bright floodlights of the staging area, or the security guard's truck. But the surface was dead. The floodlights were buzzing with that same amber glow I'd seen on the radio. The gravel parking lot was empty. I turned back to look at the hoist. The elevator was empty. The Caleb was gone. I ran to my truck, an old Chevy Silverado. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice in the dirt. When I finally got the engine to turn over, the radio immediately blared to life. No music, no die, just the sound of someone digging. Thud, scrape, thud. I floored it, the tires spitting gravel. I drove until I was miles away from the mine property, winding through the narrow, dark curves of Route 10. I needed people. I needed a crowded diner, a gas station, anything that wasn't the dark. I pulled into a 24-hour Shell station. I stumbled inside, my mining coveralls covered in coal dust and that strange amber slime. The clerk, a kid no older than 20, looked at me like I was a ghost. "Sir, you okay?" "Call the police," I gasped, leaning against the counter. "Shaft 7B, there was a cave-in. My spotter, Caleb. He's still down there." The kid frowned. He looked at the calendar on the wall, then back at me. "Sir, Shaft 7B was sealed with concrete back in the 80s. My granddad worked that mine. He said they closed that whole sector because of the gas." My heart stopped. I looked at my hands. They were stained with fresh coal dust. I looked out at my truck. In the bed of the Silverado, sitting perfectly upright, was the burlap doll. It was waving. Its small, headless arm was moving back and forth in a slow, rhythmic greeting. I didn't stay to argue. I ran back to the truck, grabbed that doll, and threw it as far as I could into the woods. I drove until I ran out of gas, 3 counties over. The aftermath, the official investigation, found that I had indeed been at the mine site, but the security footage showed me entering the property alone. There was no Caleb on the roster for 2007. In fact, the only Caleb on record was a spotter who had disappeared in a mountain bump in that exact shaft in 1984, the same year my sister died. I was diagnosed with acute dissociative fugue, brought on by methane exposure. They told me I'd had a breakdown and imagined the whole shift. But here's what they can't explain. Every year, on the anniversary of that night, I wake up and find a small pile of coal dust on my pillow. And sometimes, when the house is quiet, the ventilation ducts in my ceiling start to vibrate. It's not a whistle anymore, it's my sister's voice. And she's not singing a lullaby, she's counting down. If you ever find yourself in the deep hollers and you see a gray stone wall where there should be dirt, don't touch the carvings, and for God's sake, if you hear someone call your name from the dark, don't answer. Because the mountain doesn't just want your coal, it wants your voice. And once it has your voice, it never ever stops talking.